The first blast of energy from the alien fleet carved through the sky like a knife through butter, but instead of sending a world to oblivion, it simply disintegrated a poorly made cardboard cutout of the Earth. Commander Threx barely had time to react as his colossal fleet hung in the void, poised to annihilate everything in its path. The Empire had conquered countless worlds. They had razed planets and wiped entire civilizations from the star charts. To them, humanity was little more than a blip, a fleeting annoyance in the grand scheme of galactic conquest. Their power was unquestioned, their reign absolute. Or so they thought. Commander Threx stood before his holographic map, every sharp angle of his face betraying the certainty of his victory. "This is it," he muttered to his officers, "the last human world. We cleanse it, and we move on. Let's finish this quickly." His fleet, a terrifying display of technological superiority, filled the void of space. 100 ships of various shapes and sizes, their weapons charged and ready to vaporize any resistance. Not a single alien in the fleet had any real concern. The humans, primitive, disorganized, weak, they couldn't possibly stand against such overwhelming power. "This will be an easy victory," Threx said again, louder this time, as if the sheer repetition would make the inevitable destruction more satisfying. His officers, most of them young and untested, looked nervously at each other. They had never faced anything even remotely like the humans before. A few minor skirmishes had been wiped out with little effort, but the reports from the outer colonies weren't what they expected. There had been oddities, bizarre defense, tactics, strange maneuvers. But they were all dismissed as insignificant distractions. Humanity's best hope was their obsolete technology and primitive understanding of warfare. "What do we know about the human response, Commander?" asked one officer, his voice shaky. Threx scoffed. "They're likely still trying to figure out what kind of weapon we're using. Let them have their fun. We'll strike them down before they can even mount a resistance." He turned to the massive window, watching the Earth slowly grow larger. In the distance. The time for games was over. They had waited too long, and now the final blow would fall. "You are all here to witness the extinction of a species," Threx said, his voice cold. "When this is over, the humans will be a footnote in the history of our empire. Prepare yourselves." Meanwhile, back on Earth, a completely different scene was unfolding. The United Earth Defense Force was not prepared for an alien invasion, at least not in any conventional sense. But they weren't going down without a fight. Admiral Steve Reynolds, in his office, if you could call it that, was leaning back in his chair, feet up on the console, and watching the alien fleet on his monitor with a glass of coffee in hand. He didn't seem the least bit concerned. "Let me get this straight," Steve muttered to himself, looking at the status reports. "These aliens, giant, unstoppable, mind-meltingly powerful invaders, are coming to destroy us? Is that what I'm reading here?" Carlos, his second-in-command, appeared on the screen. "Yes, sir. The reports confirm their fleet is on the way. They're prepared to launch their full-scale assault. We're not ready. At all." Steve paused, taking a casual sip of coffee. "Huh. That's a problem. But I'm not really worried about it." Carlos looked like he might have a panic attack. "Sir, do you understand the scale of this? We're talking about hundreds of alien warships. We're lucky if we have anything capable of even scratching them." Steve just smirked. "Carlos, relax. This is going to be fun. Trust me on this one." The console beeped with an incoming transmission. It was from one of Earth's few remaining battleships, the SS Breakfast, a ship infamous for its unorthodox construction and peculiar design choices. The captain of the SS Breakfast, a man named Greg, appeared on screen wearing a bright Hawaiian shirt and sunglasses. "Admiral," Greg said cheerfully, "we're ready to deploy all the, special weapons." Steve nodded. "Good, the plan." Greg grinned. "Oh yeah, we're gonna show these guys what humanity's made of." Steve turned back to Carlos, his face lighting up with a mix of amusement and confidence. "So, here's the thing, Carlos. These aliens, they've been completely caught off guard. They've got no idea what they're walking into. And I'm not just talking about a military response." Carlos blinked. clearly still trying to wrap his head around the situation. "You've got a plan, right?" Steve grinned, setting down his coffee. "A plan? Nah, it's not a plan. It's more like a statement. And it's gonna be hilarious." The aliens had no idea what they were up against. They thought they could crush humanity with one swift blow. But Steve Reynolds and his band of ragtag defenders had something much worse than advanced weaponry. They had chaos. They had absurdity. And soon they'd show the entire galaxy exactly what it meant to underestimate Earth. "Let's get ready to make them wish they never showed up," Steve said, his voice smooth and steady. And just like that, the countdown to the most unexpected defense humanity had ever launched began. The alien fleet surged toward Earth, its massive ships cutting through the stars with terrifying precision. They were invincible. They were unstoppable. Commander Threx stared at the planet through the observation window of his flagship, the Dreadnought Perdition, his lips curling into a smile. His victory was assured. He could almost hear the humans screaming in terror already. The tiny, fragile creatures were no match for the might of the Empire. "Commander, the Earth's defenses are coming online," one of his officers reported, nervously glancing at the display. Threx didn't respond immediately. Instead, he tapped a clawed finger against the command console and scoffed. "Let them try," he said. "Activate the weapons. Prepare for the final strike." The crew of the Dreadnought Perdition went into action, their movements sharp and efficient. The last traces of any human hope were about to be obliterated. There would be no resistance. The humans had no idea what was coming for them. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the situation was anything but panic. Admiral Steve Reynolds paced leisurely around his command center, his hands in his pockets, looking completely unfazed. The SS, Snacks, Earth's flagship, was positioned just outside the atmosphere, ready for whatever was thrown at them. Steve wasn't sweating. In fact, he seemed almost bored by the whole thing. "Status report?" Steve asked casually as he leaned over to the communications console, checking the incoming data. "Sir," Carlos said, his voice tight with tension, "the alien fleet is entering Earth's atmosphere. They're charging up their weapons. It looks like they're ready to launch their first attack." Steve gave a nonchalant wave of his hand. "Yeah, I saw that coming. No need to worry, though. Carlos, initiate Phase 2. Carlos blinked, his confusion evident. "Phase 2? But we haven't—" "I know what we've got," Steve interrupted, grinning. "And we're gonna use it. Time to give these guys a little surprise." Carlos glanced nervously at the console but started typing away. In the vastness of space, across Earth's orbit, the first human ship, the Dreadnought Coffee, emerged. It wasn't a sleek warship by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, it looked more like a caffeine-fueled tank on wheels, an absurdity on every level. The ship's hull was covered in the most garish designs, all featuring logos for various coffee brands, complete with an oversized glowing coffee cup atop the bridge. In the cargo hold, boxes upon boxes of coffee beans. "Sir," Carlos said, watching in disbelief. They're launching coffee?" Steve grinned, leaning over to the controls. "Yep, and you know what they say, if you can't beat them, make sure they get a really strong dose of caffeine first. But we're not stopping there, Carlos. Oh no. Phase 3 is coming up right after that." As the Dreadnought Coffee sped toward the alien fleet, the human ships, ridiculously under-equipped compared to the Empire, began to open fire, but not with lasers or missiles. Instead, the coffee ship launched an unholy barrage of massive, scalding coffee vats toward the aliens. The alien ships, clearly unprepared for such an unconventional attack, barely had time to react before the first wave of coffee bombs collided, with their shields splattering hot aromatic liquid across the surface of their craft. The alien fleet's weapons charged, and their screens flickered with fury. "What is this?" Threx bellowed, his claws tightening around the armrest of his throne. "These humans, are they mocking us?" His officer hesitated. It appears so, Commander, but the coffee, it's disrupting our sensors. And it smells strange." "Strange?" Threx screamed. "Destroy them now, or I'll have you thrown into the brig." The order came, and the alien ships unleashed their first volley, massive plasma blasts streaking through the void toward the dreadnought Coffee. But the ship, in all its absurdity, wasn't interested in conventional warfare. Instead, it deployed hundreds of oversized foam projectiles that erupted into massive clouds of foamy bubbles, completely obscuring the alien weapons' targeting systems. The blasts whizzed off into space, harmlessly dissipating into the void. "Nice try," Steve muttered under his breath, watching as the dreadnought Coffee deployed its next weapon, giant inflatable ducks. These massive comical creatures exploded out of the cargo holds and spread out across the fleet, filling the battlefield with inflatable chaos. Alien ships, now unable to track their targets due to the sudden eruption of absurdity, began to veer off course, crashing into each other in a stunning display of confusion. "Sir," Carlos said, watching the chaos unfold, "I don't think they're prepared for this." "Not even close," Steve replied with a grin. The alien ships began firing wildly, unable to hit the dreadnought Coffee or its absurd armada. The confusion was only getting worse. In one corner of the battlefield, a small SS Waffle, a bizarre pancake-shaped craft, released a barrage of syrup projectiles that splattered over several alien ships, causing them to skid out of control. The syrup began to interfere with the ship's electrical systems, causing cascading failures across the alien fleet. Jellarok's face twisted with disbelief. They're just messing with us," he hissed. One officer turned to him, a look of panic in their eyes. "Commander, the ships, they're getting out of control. The foam, the syrup, the ducks, the fleet is in disarray." Jellarok slammed his fist down on the console. "No, I will not be humiliated by these insignificant creatures." His face turned red with rage. "Prepare the fleet for a full strike. I don't care if they're throwing pancakes at us, they will fall." But as Jellarok bellowed orders, something even stranger happened. A new ship, the Pizza Attack, appeared on the battlefield. This one was shaped like an enormous pizza, cheese dripping down the sides, pepperoni spiraling outward, like laser beams. The ship launched its own unique weapon, a barrage of flaming hot pepperoni discs that rocketed across the field. They didn't explode. No, they didn't need to. Each pepperoni disc was engineered to slip into the engines of the alien ships, causing their systems to overheat and stall. We can't fight this," one of the alien officers shrieked. Another alien ship attempted to retaliate by launching missiles. But before the warheads could hit anything, the Pizza Attack unleashed its final and most devious weapon, a blinding flash of pure disco light. The lights shot out in every direction, instantly disorienting the alien fleet. Crew members stumbled, their minds warped by the flashing lights and thumping bass coming from nowhere. In the middle of a full-scale battle, the entire fleet was trapped in an involuntary dance party. "You've got to be kidding me," Jellarok muttered, his face turning green with fury as his officers danced in front of him, their limbs jerking uncontrollably, to the beat. He slammed his fist on the console again, shouting, "Get us out of here! Prepare the retreat! This is madness!" But it was too late. The SS Snacks, still flying casually above the chaos, released the final piece of humanity's retaliation. A massive sound wave erupted from the ship, carrying with it the worst of humanity's most annoying audio. Endless loops of elevator music, the sound of loud chewing, and the incessant chatter of an insufferable morning show. The noise tore through the alien fleet's comm systems, overriding everything with dissonant, annoying noise. The alien fleet was now officially in full panic mode. Threx's face was a mask of frustration as his ships, caught in disarray, began retreating. But not before a few of them, completely overwhelmed by the chaos, crashed into each other, breaking apart in a hilarious, comical mess of twisted metal. Steve. Reynolds stood at the helm of the SS Snacks, watching with satisfaction as the alien fleet scrambled to leave. "Carlos," he said, his voice barely louder than a whisper, "this is too easy, it's almost disappointing." Carlos, who was still recovering from the absurdity of the battle, could only blink. This isn't even real. Are we actually winning?" Steve leaned back, grinning. "Oh yeah, Carlos, and we've only just started." The retreating alien fleet, A disjointed, half-blinded mess of panic veered off in every direction, like a school of fish spooked by a predator. The sound of dissonant elevator music still vibrated through the void, while the occasional missile exploded in the distance, harmless yet somehow more ridiculous with each passing moment. It wasn't how Commander Threx had imagined his conquest of Earth, not even close. "This can't be happening," he muttered, eyes bloodshot and frantic. "We are the Empire. We are perfection." His ship, the dreadnought Perdition, shook as another blast of syrup hit its surface, followed by a barrage of inflatable flamingos from a nearby SS Waffle ship. The rubbery birds bounced off the hull with the most absurd squelching sounds. Schlorach's mind raced. Everything he had known, everything the Empire had stood for, was crumbling. He had spent years building this moment, the destruction of Earth, and now he was the one being made a fool of. "Commander," a nervous officer shouted from across the command deck. "The fleet is in total chaos. Sensors are failing across the board. We can't target the human ships anymore." Schlorach barely registered the report. He was staring at the view of Earth on the massive display window, helpless as his empire was being humiliated in front of an entire galaxy. "How did we get here?" he murmured, his voice devoid of his usual authoritarian strength. "We had them. They were nothing." "Sir," another officer added cautiously, "we have a new communication coming through from Earth. It's a video transmission. It's from the humans again." Schlorach blinked, his eyes narrowing. "Another prank?" he growled, suddenly more furious than afraid. "I'll end them myself." But when the transmission came on, it was not the image of a human soldier or another random character grinning from behind a mustache. No. This time, it was something far worse. The screen flickered, and instead of the usual array of memes or embarrassing clips, there was a simple image of a large, glowing button. The button read, "Panic button. Press at your own risk." A low hum began vibrating through the ship as the voice of Admiral Steve Reynolds filled the room. His face, still clad in an impossibly smug grin, appeared over the screen. "Hey, Threx," Steve said casually. "We've got a little surprise for you. The real fun is just about to begin." Threx's eyes widened. "What is this? What are you doing?" he shouted, gripping his console in alarm. But Steve wasn't listening. "Now I know you've got your mighty fleet, your advanced weaponry, and your plans for destruction. But the thing is, we've got one little trick you'll never see coming. And it's about to get real weird. Consider this a gift from humanity." The image flickered again, this time showing a massive, rotating symbol, a flashing beacon of multicolored lights, like a carnival ride that had been pulled from some bizarre alternate dimension. It hummed with an otherworldly energy, and suddenly, a deep otherworldly laugh erupted from the speakers. "You've got to be kidding me," one of the alien officers whispered in disbelief. Before anyone could react, the glowing button on the screen in front of Threx's ship's control panel flashed, and the entire system went dark. For a moment, the deck fell completely silent. The hum of energy vanished. The vibrations ceased. And then, bang! A shockwave rippled through the alien flagship. It wasn't a physical force. No, it was far worse. It was an emotional blast. The sensation was like being hit by a wave of overwhelming absurdity, a power so strange and disturbing that it left all the crew members frozen, completely unable to react. Threx stumbled backward, clutching his head. "What is this? What's happening?" The fleet was shaking, its sensors completely overloaded by the mysterious force. But the worst was yet to come. In the middle of space, the human fleet, the SS Snacks, at its center, launched the next stage of their counterattack. This wasn't just another ridiculous tactic like rubber ducks or confetti. No, this time the humans had gone too far. They had tapped into something no one, not even the Empire, could have prepared for. The resonator. The resonator, a weapon Steve had personally devised, wasn't just an assault on their ships. No, it was a full-scale psychological assault on everything the Empire held dear. The weapon fired a pulse that reverberated across the alien fleet, sending waves of mind-warping confusion and paranoia into the very minds of the invaders. For the first time, the Empire wasn't dealing with the humans' weaknesses, they were facing their own. "What's happening to me?" one of the officers cried out, as his vision blurred, images of strange symbols dancing across his field of view. I don't understand. I feel like I'm becoming something else." The voices within the alien fleet grew louder, panicked, confused. In one instant, their order, their structure, their very way of thinking, everything they had believed in, collapsed. The officers screamed. Threx's claws trembled and he began frantically trying to shut down the weapon, but it was too late. Humanity wasn't just attacking the Empire's ships with foam and pizza, it was attacking their minds, warping their thoughts, scrambling their perception of reality itself. "Commander!" one officer screamed, clutching his head as the effects of the weapon intensified. "The Emperor is singing opera." Threx's gaze sharpened. The voices in his head were growing louder, more insistent. "Stop," he ordered, shaking. "This is a manipulation." A deep, resonating chuckle echoed through his thoughts. "Oh, it's not manipulation, Threx," came Steve's voice again, smooth and almost too relaxed. "It's called the Resonator. We made it with a little help from our finest minds, and a lot of weirdness. You'd be surprised what humanity can achieve when it gets creative. Too bad you're about to find out." "Shut it down! Now!" Threx screamed. But the more he shouted, the more his thoughts splintered, his speech becoming jumbled. His own crew members started to flee the command deck, not out of fear, but because they couldn't stand the noise in their minds anymore. The dreadnought Perdition, the symbol of the Empire's might, was crumbling. Not due to superior weaponry, but because its crew couldn't even trust what they were seeing or hearing. They were lost in a world they couldn't comprehend. The Resonator wasn't just affecting the fleet, it was targeting the very heart of the Empire's control. Their commander was losing his grip. His officers were spiraling into madness, muttering incoherently about voices, opera, and unexplainable visions. One by one, the ships in the fleet began to malfunction. Communication systems went haywire. Weapon systems misfired in every direction. And in the midst of it all, Steve Reynolds watched with an ever-growing grin. This was the ultimate counterattack. Bizarre, innovative, and utterly effective. The dreadnought Perdition shuddered as another wave of Resonator pulses hit, and Zlorok's face twisted with madness. We can't take this," he whispered. His voice had cracked under the strain. This is too much." "Too much?" Steve's voice rang through the comms again, colder now. "No, Zlorok, you're just beginning to understand. The universe is chaos. And Earth? Well, we're the masters of it." As the alien fleet disintegrated, shattered by confusion and psychological warfare, the implications of the battle became clear. Humanity had no fleet, no massive warships, no technological superiority. But they had something the Empire had never accounted for: unpredictability, creativity, and the uncanny ability to turn the tables with sheer absurdity. The aliens were finished, and in the silence of space, only the hum of the Resonator remained, its power reverberating through the galaxy. The alien fleet was falling apart. Their once pristine formations had crumbled like a house of cards, the ships veering off in every direction as they tried to escape the devastating effects of the Resonator. Panic had fully set in, and with it the Empire's iron grip on the galaxy began to slip. Commander Threx, once so certain of his victory, now clung to the last vestiges of his authority. But the damage had already been done. Zlorok was pacing wildly around the command deck of the dreadnought Perdition, his mind racing with fury and confusion. The once mighty flagship was now a chaotic mess of malfunctioning systems and delirious officers. Half of his crew had abandoned their posts, wandering the halls, babbling incoherently about opera singing, syrup clouds, and a giant pizza ship that had somehow destroyed their battle tactics. Their minds were fractured beyond repair. Threx, slammed his claws into the control panel, nearly breaking it in his frustration. "Get us out of here, full retreat," he barked, but the retreat was already too late. The SS Snacks, the human flagship, had already taken its position above the shattered remains of the Empire's fleet, silently floating like a king surveying the battlefield. Steve Reynolds, as calm as ever, stood at the helm with a cold, satisfied smile on his face. "Sir," Carlos said, his voice hesitant, "we've won. The aliens are fleeing, and their fleet is falling apart. But what now?" Steve raised an eyebrow, his smirk widening. "Carlos, the real fun is just beginning. They may be running now, but we're going to make sure they never forget this." As if on cue, the SS Snacks transmitted a final message across the galaxy. It wasn't an attack. It wasn't a final blow. It was a declaration. The holographic screen flickered on, and Steve Reynolds' face appeared in full, smug glory. "Greetings, galactic tyrants," Steve's voice boomed, completely unbothered. "This is Admiral Steve Reynolds of Earth, broadcasting live from the greatest victory of the century. First off, we want to thank you for your exceptional entertainment value. I don't know about you, but I've never laughed so hard in my life." The alien commanders, still stumbling under the effects of the resonator, could only glare at the transmission, their minds too shattered to respond. Schlorach's face twitched in rage, but the words wouldn't come. He was utterly paralyzed by the psychological assault. "Now, as for your retreat," Steve continued, "I think you all deserve a little parting gift. See, you thought you could. Just show up, throw around a few big explosions and take over a planet. But that's not how we do things here on Earth. We've got something special in mind for you." With a few swift taps, Steve sent the final piece of the plan into motion. Across the galaxy, the last remnants of the Empire's warships were still limping away from the battlefield, but the transmission wasn't done. A new image flickered on the screens of the alien ships, an image of Earth. It was a simple shot, just the planet in all its blue and green glory. But something was different. There was something off about it. Suddenly, the transmission was flooded with images: dancing astronauts in party hats, a man in a chicken suit doing the Macarena on the surface of the moon, and an animated giant thumbs up in the foreground of every frame. A looped video montage of Earth's finest meme-based content blasted through the alien fleet's remaining communication systems. It was the absolute worst kind of signal for their fragile psyches. A relentless barrage of viral moments, cat videos, bad dance moves, and audio clips of honking horns and air horns blaring. "What is this?" Schlorach screamed, clutching his temples as the memes assaulted his senses. "No, stop it!" But it didn't stop. It only intensified. The alien ships, struggling to regain control of their systems, were bombarded by the constant onslaught of human absurdity. The once great fleet, feared by countless species, was being shredded by nothing more than memes, viral videos, and the inescapable sound of a foghorn on loop. In the dreadnought perdition, Thrax collapsed to his knees, his mind unraveling under the weight of it all. He had believed that the humans were beneath the Empire, that they were insignificant. Now here he was, reduced to a mere spectator, helpless against the mind-shattering power of Earth's chaotic energy. We can't stop it," one of the officers whimpered. This is madness. It's too much." Back in the SS Snacks, Steve Reynolds was watching the show unfold with a level of satisfaction that could only come from a job well done. "Carlos," he said, sipping his coffee nonchalantly, "do you think they're getting the message?" Carlos couldn't even speak. He simply nodded, wide-eyed, as the alien fleet continued to fall apart. There was no resistance left. There was no order. It was as if the very foundation of the Empire had crumbled under the weight of its own arrogance, and all it had taken was a little creativity and a lot of ridiculousness from Earth. Steve turned to the communications console, a wicked grin playing across his lips. "Let's send them one last message, Carlos. It's time for the grand finale." The final transmission went out across the galaxy, reaching every corner of the Empire's vast territory. The voice that filled every alien ship was unmistakable. It was Steve's, but this time it was infused with a certain level of playful finality. "This is Admiral Steve Reynolds once again," he said, his voice carrying across the stars. "And to everyone listening in the Empire, I've got a little message for you. When you come to Earth, remember this. We may not have the biggest weapons or the most advanced technology, but we have chaos. And if there's one thing we do better than anyone, it's laugh at those who think they're above us." Steve leaned back in his chair, looking at the view of the shattered fleet on his screen. "Consider this a lesson in humility, aliens. You tried to conquer us, and in the end, we turned you into a punchline." With that, he ended the transmission. The battle was won, and the alien fleet was in full retreat, broken and discredited. The Earth had proven itself, not through overwhelming force, but through creativity, absurdity, and an impeccable sense of humor. The galaxy, it seemed, would never look at Earth the same way again. And Steve Reynolds? Well, he simply leaned back in his chair, clinking his coffee mug against Carlos's. "To Earth," he said, grinning wide, "the new rulers of the galaxy." And just like that, the universe learned the most important lesson of all: underestimate humanity at your own peril.